The Russians will be forced to scale down its attacks in the coming month and a half. That is what the Ukrainian commander of the National Guard is saying, and let's break it down because he's pretty much right on the money, something that we've been talking about for the past few months. Before we dive into this story, I have to say, yes, you can make all the comments you want about my eye in the comment section below, but the story is the most important thing. I say that because of my TikToks. The first thing people are talking about is my eye, which for the most part, I can't really see out of. So we're just going to deal with that, keep creating videos for Ukraine, and move forward. So back to this story. Russia will be forced to scale down its attacks in a month and a half. Where is this coming from? It's coming from the commander of Ukraine's National Guard. He did an interview and he said that Russia will be unable to maintain the scale of its attacks in multiple sectors for a long time because its capabilities are not unlimited. You gotta remember something. Let's jump back about 3-4 months ago. Ukraine was not getting any more ammunition and support from the United States. From the Russian point of view, it looked like that all their supplies were dwindling. They were losing men, they didn't have equipment, and so they figured they would expand on the front lines, moving men, equipment, resources just north of Kharkiv and even some areas closer to Sumy. They thought that because Ukraine was not getting this stuff, they're going to be able to kind of push through Ukraine and retake Ukraine's second largest city, the city of Kharkiv. Well, as that was going on in the front, in the backgrounds, Ukrainians, a lot of officials are talking to U.S. officials, explaining what they're seeing, showcasing all the images they're showing, saying, hey, look, there is a lot of buildup over here. We need to do something about this or it's going to become a problem. That's why, not one random week, all the way, 3-4 months ago, the United States was able to pass funding in the U.S. Congress and the Senate and the president all signed it within like a week and a half, which had to have been the fastest amount of money ever signed off that quickly for another country. Which, remember, it's not really money. It was money to make weapons for the United States, to rebuild their stockpile, then money to build weapons in the United States for Ukraine. So Ukraine never got actual money. That being said, Ukraine was able to get that stuff to the front lines, which brought the daily casualty rate for the Russians to about, I would say, 1,250, and they were losing tanks so quickly to the point to where Zelensky said this past week that it was over 20,000 Russian deaths just in Kharkiv. You see, because Russia moved all their resources, and because Ukraine was able to destroy so much so quickly, it created a bigger problem for Russia. You see, they're the ones that made the front lines very thin. And their mindset was, well, Ukraine wasn't going to get anything. We could push right through them. But now we're getting to the point in time to where Russia's still losing a lot of men. I mean, look at this. Today, according to the Kyiv Post, Russia lost 1,230 men, 11 tanks, 45 artillery, other armed vehicles, 26. And we also have reports of a downed Russian helicopter, which was supposedly going after Ukrainian drones, and somehow it crashed. All that being said, it now leads us to this interview about what's happening. Russia is pushing as fast and as hard as they can, and we are seeing that. I'm not going to lie to you. If you look at Donetsk, you'll see that Russia has been putting a lot of manpower and a lot of equipment through the meat grinder to try to cut off Ukrainian supplies towards Avdiivka. And they're doing it as fast as possible because they know that as soon as Ukraine has F-16s in the skies, they're going to have air support, which for the most part, Ukraine doesn't have right now. It's mostly ground support firing into Russian advances or strongholds. But if Ukraine could be doing it from the ground and the skies, then Russia's going to be pushed back a lot. Add that into the fact that Russia is unable to get really high-trained men on the front lines, so they're just pulling in people and then throwing them into, once again, the meat grinder to try to push the Ukrainians further and further back. And that's pretty much what this commander is saying here. He's saying it is difficult at the front line, but the enemy's offensive capabilities are not unlimited, and they suffer losses. I think in another month or a month and a half, they will not be able to conduct active assaults in many directions at once, and will be on the defensive in any case. And during this time, we need to form our units and prepare them. This is war. Think of it like this. Russia created this massive front lines. Their men are dwindling. The equipment's dwindling. And they're getting to the point to where they can't hold on to areas. So they've got a choice. They could either stop pushing forward in some areas and defend, or they retract men from some of those very thinned out areas and bring it to one point. Which brings us to a thought. Is Russia, still knowing that F-16s are coming, will they, say, maybe pull back from Kharkiv and other areas and go to one area, or will they double down in certain areas and try to keep the front lines as tight as possible? We don't really know at this time. It's kind of like one of those things where you're saying to yourself, all right, Russia knows they don't have the equipment, they don't have the men. Do they keep pushing in all directions? Do they just stick to one? I think what's going to happen is that Russia's going to try to come back and consolidate in Avdiivka and try to push through Ukraine that way. We really don't know at this time, though. I mean, look what's going on in Crimea. You can see that Russia's pulling resources out. They're losing air defense systems. They brought out all their military ships, pretty much defeating the Black Sea fleet that Russia had. And it's at a point to where Russia can see that they're starting to fall back on certain areas. And if Russia wanted to even have some kind of offensive, they have to consolidate. And I think that consolidation would be towards Avdiivka. Because if Russia can kind of keep pushing up, they could shut off the supply chain that Ukraine has, which is that main highway. But that's a lot of work, and I don't think that Russia has it at this time. From the Ukrainian point of view, you know, F-16s coming in, they keep saying is not going to be a main difference, but I disagree. Because if Ukraine can get the upper hand in Crimea and in other areas, then Russia will be forced to negotiate and have some kind of peace talks. Not saying that's going to happen this year, but from the looks of it, Ukraine is going to get F-16s, they're going to fire deep in Crimea, probably mess up Crimea so bad, or at least the Russian positions in Crimea so bad that Russia will probably get out of there. In Kharkiv, we already see Ukrainians firing into Russia just north of Kharkiv, and if they get permission to strike deeper, then Russia's really going to have a bigger problem. And everything is pointing into Ukraine kind of getting the upper hand within a month and a half. And at that point, that's where the next summit could potentially happen and have Russia come to the table. With Ukraine having the upper hand, they can kind of dictate what things are going to be what. And, you know, when I say dictate, I don't mean like Russia's dictate. It is all the countries in the world coming together saying, this is what needs to be done so that Russia, you cannot do this to any other country. And so back to this general, what he's saying here, he says, we need to adapt, change the management model, set tasks. If it doesn't work, try something else. But you can't change everything radically. Everything takes time, especially when it comes to systematic changes. Saying that Ukraine should evaluate everything, look to see where Russia is coming from, what they're doing, reevaluate what they're doing, and then kind of move from there. They need to be more fluid. And we get that. It was the, movement of Ukrainian troops and equipment that stopped Russia in Kharkiv. We just need to do that in other areas, but we have to look at Russia and see what they're doing before we do something. Moving forward, does this mean that Russia's going to slow down? Probably not. If anything, Russia's going to try to defend Donetsk, and I don't even know if you want to say Crimea, because Russia at this point, they're really not doing much to defend Crimea. And I think if Ukraine really wanted to put all their resources into it, they could take Crimea. And I mean, that would be a big smack in the face to Russia. But does Ukraine want to take on that responsibility? Because then once they get through there, they have to build up fortifications, which takes resources and men and all this other stuff, which they might be better off using trying to get Russia out of Donetsk. Because Crimea is already its own island, if you think about it. Okay, if they can push Russia out of, the bottom half of Kherson and really encircle Crimea, then that's going to become Ukrainian very quickly, since you're cutting off all of the railways, the ferries, which another ferry was hit a few days ago, and a few other things, so Russia can't get resources in there. And people will keep on saying, should they get rid of the Crimean bridge? No, you want to keep that bridge up, because when Ukraine starts finally getting into Crimea, you want the Russian population to get out. And they don't have ferries. They're not going to take the train out through the northeastern part of Crimea. What are they going to do? They have to take the bridge. And that's why they took it to a point to where it's still standing, but Russia can't really use it to send weapons and really anything on it. So my mindset is that Ukraine's going to get the upper hand in about a month and a half. The Kharkiv offensive that Russia has is not existent. In Donetsk, as soon as F-16s come in, they're going to give a lot of air support to the troops. They're going to push the Russians back. Ukrainians are going to move under Kherson and cut off Crimea and then kind of push the Russians up. That is what I think could be happening. And I'm not saying it's going to be happening within the next month and a half. That's probably a year from now. But from the looks of it, and hopefully if other countries give more air defense systems and more long-range weapons, that is what we could be looking at. So will Russia be switching from offensive to defensive in a month and a half? Very likely. But let me know what you think in the comment section below, and if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and give this video a thumbs up. I'm Joey. Stay safe. See you later. Bye.